Hello and welcome to Mary Makes. I'm Mary and today I am so excited to show you my completed granny square blanket that I made with Premier Yarns Chenille Minikins yarn. In this video, I'm going to be sharing what I loved most about this yarn, some of the challenges I faced, and some tips I have for overcoming those challenges. So keep watching if this is a yarn that you're interested in and you're evaluating to see if you want to make a granny square blanket yourself. So first off, what I loved about this yarn is I always come back to there were very few yarn ends for me to tuck in at the end of the day. Each square has one tail at the center where you start and one tail at the end. So in this blanket with 12 squares, I only had 24 tails to tuck in. And then I crocheted, I kept it simple. I did a single crochet, a row of single crochet for the border, followed by a row of slip stitches. So, only two more yarn ends there. And when I attached the squares together, I used the zigzag method of joining. That's basically where you alternating slip stitch into each stitch in either granny square. This isn't a tutorial, and there's plenty of tutorials online if you want to look up how to do the zigzag join, but I just really like this join because it adds like a ridge and adds a little extra texture, which I like. So, a handful, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So like 10 more yarn ends there. It was very few. The fact that I can be on video and count how many yarn ends that I had to tuck in with you speaks to how fast it was. Whereas ordinarily, if I was making a granny square with all of these different colors, I would have had to use this color, tuck in 2 yarn ends for this color, use this color, 2 yarn ends for that one, so on and so forth. So just that ease made this blanket work up so fast, which, speaking of the lack of yarn ends, I completed this blanket in less than a week, and it's also like I wasn't only working on this blanket this week. I used my leisure time on a lot of other things. So the fact that it worked up so fast and felt like very little effort was put in on my part made me really excited about it. It just like fell off my crochet hook. Another thing I loved about this yarn is the fact that I have hardly any leftover yarn. It's actually really nice. I mean, given that I have such a big yarn stash, it's really nice to not have a bunch of scraps and leftover colors, which, speaking of the colors, another thing I love about this is that I did not have to buy a bazillion colors to make such a beautiful, fun, and vibrant blanket. I mean, I would have had to buy, I don't even want to count, a lot of different colors if I wanted to make this exact same blanket without Chenille Minikins yarn. And then I think I'd say the last thing I love about this yarn is that it's very consistent with itself. Meaning that once I figured out my tension and gauge and what size crochet hook I needed to use to make sure the colors lined up well, that's when I felt like I locked in and could just crochet squares without really thinking too hard about it. I was a little slow. I feel like I locked in around square like 6 or 7, so maybe my last half of the blanket was what were squares where I didn't really have to unravel and redo rows anymore, but certainly for like my first half of the blanket I was doing a lot more unraveling. But it being consistent with itself was a huge win. Now onto some challenges that I faced and some tips I have if you're looking at making this blanket for yourself. So here I have a close-up of one of these squares that I made. And one consistent challenge I had with this yarn is that this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this 5th color would always seem a little short. And in some balls, it was a non-issue. In other balls, namely this one, it was particularly bad. And you can see because, I only had a set amount of this yellow color compared to this orange color. Like, these orange granny units, this orange piece here is a much bigger granny unit than this yellow bit here. So consistently, when I got to row 5, I had to tighten up my tension and go to a smaller crochet hook. This is the most extreme example I have, is this color. I think this color must be Horizon in the set of 12 colors that are available for Premier Minikins Chenille. But most of the other squares, I did not have that big of an issue. I think my second complaint or challenge with this yarn is really the color changes. Sometimes they just were not very neat and not very pretty to look at, as you can see with this square. Now, there's probably things I could have done to make this look less obvious in terms of the color change, but I just didn't realize that it would bother me so much until after the blanket was completed. In general, my later squares, which one was the square that I made last? I think maybe this one was my last square. It became less of a problem because I figured out a way to kind of quote, quote, cheat with my yarn. And I'm going to show you what I did. Obviously, I have no more of this yarn, so I mocked up an example using regular worsted weight yarn. And so one of the things I would consistently run into with the first 3 colors is that I would have too much of it, which is a good problem to have because if you have too much of the color, you could just cut it off and give yourself another yarn end to tuck in. But if you're stubborn like me and you don't want to tuck in any yarn ends, and you're in this situation where like clearly I made this example myself, you've done the first row of your granny square and your color changes all the way out here and you just have a little bit extra. One of the things that I did is to just yarn over before I slip stitch. I'm pretty sure this is actually called there's a name for this stitch. I just don't remember what it's actually called. But then when you yarn over before you slip stitch, you'll have 3 on your hook and you want to drag the first loop through the remaining 2. And that's a clever way to cheat with how much yarn you have. So I'm going to do another like yarn over slip stitch. Whoops, I'm crocheting at a weird angle with my phone set up. Give me 1 second. Yarn over, insert your hook, drop a loop, and then slip stitch that loop through the 2. And then this usually allowed me to set up so that my color change was right in the corner here, like I'm showing you in this example that I mocked up. So had I done this sooner, where I yarned over before I slip stitched, or did some combination, maybe 2 regular slip stitches and a yarn over slip stitch, depending on how much leftover color you have, I think I could have manipulated where the color change ended up better. But that's my pro tip for working with this yarn, is that your inner rows, you're gonna have a lot extra. Like these inner rows, I was crocheting with a loose tension with a 9mm crochet hook. This yarn calls for an 8mm crochet hook, and I'd like to think I'm not terribly off, but it's just by the time you get to this 5th row, there's so little color that you have to button it up, or you have to tighten your tension and use a smaller hook. And then I had plenty of white left over. I actually used the leftover whites to do these the zigzag join and get them all connected because I had the yarn, so it was simple to do that. So all in all, did I enjoy making this blanket? Yes. Was I super excited when I completed it? Yes. Was I a little frustrated while I made it? Yes to that as well. But at the end of the day, I'm really proud of how this blanket turned out, and it's a decent size. Each square is supposed to be 12 by 12. My squares are more 11 by 11. So, instead of 48 by 36, my blanket is really more like 44 by 33, which, who cares? It's still a decent size, like lap blanket to display on your couch. And actually, I think this blanket is going to look really cute on my couch. So to recap the pros and cons of this yarn, It's super vibrant, super beautiful. It's soft. It's got all the colors. You don't have to worry about color changes, but you'll probably have a little bit of a time guessing and checking your tension and hook size in order to make each square work. If nothing else, this project has made me more curious and more interested in granny square yarns, because I definitely think it was a good challenge to see, like, can I change up my hook size, my tension? Can I do things to edit my gauge to make this yarn work for me? And it was a welcome challenge in my case. Now, if changing up your tension, changing up your hook size, if that does not sound like the thing you want to spend your time doing, then I would not recommend this yarn for you. But let me know in the comments, have you done a blanket using granny square yarns similar to this? How did it turn out? What challenges did you run into? And of course, if you want to try out Premier Yarns Minikins Chenille, check out my affiliate link in the description. It's a great way to support my channel at no extra cost to you. With that, I hope you found this video helpful, hearing about the things that I loved about this yarn and the challenges I ran into, and I hope it makes you feel more informed going into a potential yarn purchase. Take care now, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!